foundation. At this time, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Also, I want to make but it is listed on the boards outside, so check that, and that'll be after this one. So, please,
yeah, thank you. The coveted after lunch spot and before the conference ends spot. I'll try to keep you entertained as much as I can. If not, I included some pretty pictures so you can just kind of stare off into space. So I've been with the Foundation for Pennsylvania Watersheds almost 2 years now. Got the chance to come on board as John Dawes, who's in the room, retired. I know many of you have had the chance to work with John, hand in hand with John and the Foundation in the 30 plus years that the Foundation has been around. So a little bit about my background was shared. I came from an accredited land trust, but I've been in the conservation nonprofit realm for well over 30 years, all focused on, working on small headwater streams and improving water quality in Pennsylvania. So it's been a really fun opportunity to continue to work with the groups that I have worked with in the past, but also to help figure out how to get the great work that we're doing funded. And that's a big part of the role of the foundation. The mission of the foundation is to help foster the stewardship, the protection, and the restoration of Pennsylvania's watersheds. We work really closely with nonprofits, with community groups, with local and state and federal agencies. In many ways, we're sort of a bizarre nonprofit. We're sort of a strategic intermediary. We help put dollars on the ground and fund a lot of the work that you're doing. We also put some projects on the ground. And we also really work hand in hand with nonprofits to provide capacity and be a voice through policy. So the foundation has been around for quite a while. Sorry, hang on one second here. Hit the wrong button. There we go. Is that coming back up? Good. Okay. So we help, put strategic investments on the ground. We operate with a staff of 2. It's myself and Maggie Anderson, who's also in the room here. Maggie is probably the voice and the face that you've talked to as you're looking to apply for grants through the foundation. I'm also very lucky that we continue to have John Dawes as a contractor with the foundation, helping us with some of the policy work. And many of you have probably also worked with Brandon Deal, who is also a contractor who helps do a lot of our project management. There are 3 primary pillars to FPW's work. Again, we have our conservation grants program, which many of you are probably familiar with the most. We are doing some project leadership and project implementation. And then we focus a lot through both of those, working hand in hand with you and putting projects on the ground to really tell the story of who's doing things, the great work that you're doing, be a voice through policy, but also help build capacity. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those 3 things as examples of the work that we do. So I'm curious, how many organizations are in the room have received grants from the foundation in the past? Good amount of people. Wow, that's awesome. So I won't spend a whole lot of time talking about our grants program because you're all pretty familiar. We generally do our grants 2 times a year, usually in the spring and the fall. The process is to apply through a letter of intent, and if your grant is funded, we then invite you in for the full proposal. Really, the goal of our grants are to either help you kickstart a project. So often we're the first funders in, helping you fund the kinds of things that aren't generally covered by a grant, or the due diligence work that you have to do before a grant. And sometimes we're also on the back end. So you may be putting a project on the ground and you don't have enough revenue, enough grants dollars to complete the project. And so, we like to try and come in and be an investor in your work, help leverage more dollars. And the foundation over the past couple of years, for every dollar we've invested in nonprofits, we've seen more than $22 come back into those nonprofits for the projects that they're delivering, which is a pretty great ROI, and it speaks highly to the great work that you're doing. So in conservation grants, we have convening grants. Those are the small grants that help you, if you're convening a group of nonprofits to talk about how to watershed, and you want to invite in all the watershed groups. We help fund this conference through our convening program. So it's meant to help you either bring people together, whether it's through a conference or through strategic planning. And those grants are accepted through a rolling basis. You can apply for those at any time, and we award them monthly. Little side part of our funding is we're also working hand in hand with the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission to do unassessed waters analysis. We help fund many colleges and universities that are going into small headwater streams that have never been assessed to determine what's there, with the potential of either identifying what kind of life it has and whether that stream is eligible for upgrades. And again, that's led by the Fish and Boat Commission, but that's in partnership with several universities and colleges across Pennsylvania. And then the last part of our grants program is some land conservation support. We know that there's a lot of due diligence that comes into you conserving or easing a piece of property that might be tied to your project. A lot of those due diligence things are generally not covered. So some appraisal fee, survey fee, legal costs. You can come into us through the spring and the fall grant round for small grants related to that work as well. I saw several people raise their hand. I'm curious to tell, one or two people, are you interested in sharing what you were able to accomplish with the dollars that yeah, Andy?
We pretty much every year or every other year organizing this conference, we get a convening grant. I think the limit is $2,000. And that really helps us get the scholarship money out to the nonprofits so we can help you attend. Because we understand that sometimes mileage, sometimes the hotel cost, sometimes just registration, all that kind of stuff. So we're doing that to help the nonprofit community. In other ways, we've gotten traditional grants, not convening grants, for larger amounts of money for strategic planning purposes. Last year we had a joint visioning session between the two cameras, and that final report is going to come out very shortly. That kind of thing, so we can see how we can work better together. And one of the ways that the thing that came out of that during the session, which is coming to fruition right now, is the podcast that you hear us talk about. That's another way that we can work together to further the goal. The other thing that we do is we'll occasionally get a grant to help fund the work that we're doing on the PA AML campaign, which deals with policy issues with AML. And we work very closely with the state and also the Interstate Money Compact Commission that you heard this morning, to be able to get the time and the money and the materials we need to, or travel, to find out what's going on with policy, see how our community can affect any kind of change in policy that will help AML occur. So those are just three examples.
Thank you, Andy. And that brings up, there is the PA AMR call. There are groups that get together to talk about policy and understand where things are moving. And so I would reach out to Andy if your organization has interest in participating. I saw another hand. You want to talk briefly about the stuff that you're working on?
Yeah, we have a variety. We've actually gotten some of the land conservation to help close out some of the properties that we purchased to get the easements and all the required documents for that. supporting some of the DCNR money that we get. Our treatment systems, monitoring. We probably got a lot of them, maybe 50 or so since I've been.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, these are the kinds of investments that, you know, the Foundation for Pennsylvania Watersheds works very closely with larger philanthropy to help put strategic dollars on the ground. We know that sometimes it is the $10,000, $20,000 really big project happen. You don't want to jump through all the hoops of trying to get through the RK Mellon Foundation, for example, all of the requirements that they have in the grant program, you know, to just leverage $10,000. And so that's where the foundation really, I think, thrives and shines in support for the works that are the work that's happening on the ground. But in addition to those conservation grants, I had mentioned that we're doing some policy, capacity building, and direct project implementation. And honestly, there's never been a time that's more important for nonprofits to feel like they are ready. We have an unprecedented opportunity to solve some of the most complex, complicated AMD, AML projects. And a lot of that is because of the amount of dollars that are coming into Pennsylvania. We're talking about over 300 million over the next, we have about 14 years left of the IIJ funds, in addition to the other components of the SMACRA money and those sorts of things. So as those dollars come in to Pennsylvania, it is going to be really important to help put those projects on the ground. It's vital that local communities are leading the charge, that they're organizing with their local municipalities and their conservation districts. We also want those local communities to have the vision for what these projects look like. And DEP can't spend all of this money on their own. And so they really do need the nonprofit grassroots organizations to fully leverage the amount of money that's coming in. And I find it interesting, you know, we've seen so much money come into Pennsylvania for nutrient reduction strategies, right? You know, year after year after year, we're hearing about ag BMPs that are be putting on the ground, and those are essential for improving water quality too. This is the first time, though, that I feel like AMD is really getting we're full throttle. We're finally getting the money to solve some of those problems that I know have been on the docket for a long time. So again, the opportunity is significant. DEP cannot do this on their own. We need to make sure that there is a really rigorous partnership between the nonprofit sector, the for-profit sector, the industry as well, and the consultants that are doing this work. We need to be developing that vision and putting those projects on the ground together. And so the time is now. And it's pretty exciting to think that, you know, in the next handful of years, communities are going to have potable, fishable, drinkable, potentially water for the first time in over a century. And I don't know that we've ever really I don't know that we've ever been as motivated as we are right now to make that happen, right? So we've done a number of things to help jump in and make sure that we're fully leveraging that work. That we've jumped into helping do some policy outreach. Things like the STREAM Act, the 30% set aside, the reauthorization of SMACRA. Those things would not have happened without the voices of the people sitting around in this room right now. A big part of it also to the foundation and John Dawes' voice. But in addition to that, we need to continue to defend the IIJ money that's coming into Pennsylvania. We need to make sure that our politicians are hearing about the projects that are going on the ground. We need to let legislators know why keeping that federal funding flowing, even through executive orders and funding freezes and agencies that are being decimated. You know, we need to tell the story of why this money is important. And so that policy outreach is a critical component of the work that we're doing. And we're happy to help tell the stories of the work that you're doing, especially as we come across and see it. So please continue to share what you're working on. There are people in the room here like Bobby Hughes, who participates in Capitol Hill Days, telling the stories of the great work you do. So, you know, that policy outreach is an essential part of protecting the funds in Pennsylvania. The other part that the foundation has been working on over the last year are two other pieces that I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into, and that's our working capital loans and compliance with federal requirements. So, working capital. We know that the current state and federal policies require grants to be reimbursable. So, as a nonprofit, you're not getting any upfront working capital. You are putting projects on the ground and waiting for those reimbursements to come back in. Sometimes those reimbursements take a little while. Sometimes you're an all-volunteer staff and you're all-volunteer organization. You're waiting 3 or 4 months as you're processing invoices and getting your reimbursements back in. And then the consultants who are providing you services are waiting for very long periods of time to get paid, or you're trying to pay those bills without having the money in your pocket yourself. So most nonprofits, most watershed organizations do not have the cash flow to pay vendors within the 30 days that's often written into their contract. So the foundation has worked to have a small pot of dollars of a working capital loan. You need to have a project that is funded and contracted. You'll need to share that contract along with some of your financials of your organization. But the foundation will loan to you up to $50,000 interest-free for the lifetime of your grant, so that you can have some level of cash flow to keep your vendors getting paid as you're waiting for reimbursements. The other part of the working capital piece are lines of credit with a bank. Some watershed associations, nonprofits, conservation districts, some of you may have lines of credit with your bank already. Some of you may be thinking about seeking a line of credit. That line of credit would do the same thing as our working capital loan, except there would be some interest charged. According to 2 CFR 200, working capital loans of lines of credit with banks can be an allowable expense depending on the kind of project. If it's a capital improvement asset that will build something like an active treatment system or a passive treatment system, those interests can be written into a grant ahead of time. And so I highly recommend you sitting down with your DEP grant advisor and also sitting down with your bank. If you are thinking about moving to a implementation of a project that's pretty large, that you need more than $50,000 of cash flow, begin the process well before the application process so that you can talk about what a line of credit might do for your organization. The other fun component is, you know that as a nonprofit, as you're handling federal dollars, you need to be in compliance with federal requirements. And some of those, I heard actually a couple of people say while we were here at the conference, I'm not touching those grants. I'm scared of those grants. I won't even apply. And that's the exact opposite of what we want to happen, right? We want as many people putting projects on the ground as possible. But getting over that hurdle of understanding what are all the things I need to have in place for my nonprofit or my watershed organization to make sure I'm in compliance with the review that's going to happen. You might get audited, whether it's from, audited from the EPA. If you have enough revenue, you're going to have a single project audit. You need to make sure that you're in compliance with all of these things. And DEP wants to know that you're in compliance and you have all these things in place. That will probably be part of the review as they're considering whether you're a grantee that they'll fund. So we are in the process of putting together, and we'll be ready here this fall, a series of templates for you to adopt at your board level of policies and procedures. And that would be one document that would outline everything from financial management systems, the protocols you have in place for when you pay bills, who signs off on checks, how you procure services. So if you have a grant and you need to hire a contractor that's above the minimum limit and you need to put an RFP out, you need to have all of those policies in place. What happens to some of the property that you might acquire, whether it's data loggers, whatever. How do I maintain it? How do I purchase it? How do I what is the disposition after the grant is over? Again, that is another policy that many nonprofits have in place. Compensation, how do I keep track of my time and the staff time that people are working on the projects? How long do I need to retain records? How do I go through an audit? How do I close out my grant at the very end? These are all the kinds of templates that will be provided to nonprofits. In addition to the templates, we are going to do a whole series of recorded webinars and a training. So the first part would be recorded webinars that you can watch on your own time. And then we will have a legal team and an auditing team that are available for specific calls on specific topics, where you can call in, hear a presentation, and then ask lots of questions of them. And then once the webinars and the training is done, we will have some funding for a handful of nonprofits to actually get one-on-one mentorship to get all of their policies and protocols in place. But we would require that you sit through the beginning parts of the webinars and the trainings first to really understand whether adopting all of these kinds of policies are things that your watershed organization wants to do. And that way you're staged and ready for applying for grant applications. I will be taking questions. I see a couple people have questions. I'm really curious though, we've tried to hit some of what we see as some of the bottlenecks in the process for nonprofits through helping be a voice, helping provide working capital, and helping provide trainings for compliance. I'm really interested, what are some of the other challenges that you're facing with funding or capacity or project implementation? Because we want to make sure that we're providing that kind of support to you. Anybody willing to share with us the bottlenecks you face or the needs that your organization has? Andy?
I'll say we haven't had this problem, but I've heard from other people that a significant bottleneck is interpretation of 2 CFR 200 between state agencies, federal agencies, multiple federal agencies. And I think that therein lies a problem. And that's one reason why many people are looking at this going, I don't know, I don't think I want to do this. Because it seems like we have 20 different understandings, whereas the federal government, thou shalt have one understanding of this. So this is really making the watershed community very nervous about this. And I think that becomes a bottleneck, which is only going to be deleterious to the state agencies trying to get this money on the ground. Because if you don't get the people to feel comfortable in doing this, you're not going to get their help. And are you capable of doing it all yourself? That's what it comes down to.
I think the sessions that are happening this afternoon from DEP will help answer some of the questions of requirements for the grant program, and that should be really helpful as well. Carla?
I'll share our vote. We've been working with Heather, so I don't think it's an issue with us anymore. As one of the big things we had was the indirect funding and the understanding of that and how much is allowed. I know a lot of groups that attended the one meeting we had over at the Cambria office earlier in the year was understanding what the indirect can be used for and that it wasn't enough money to actually manage the projects. But I know we had that meeting and I think that cleared up a little bit. And I know there's other things that they're doing now in the program. That was like a big deterrent for us, was that indirect cost.
And making sure that when you're entering drafting a budget for a project, knowing what you can incorporate as direct costs versus indirect costs is really important. One of the webinars that will happen is also how to negotiate a new indirect rate. So the standard is 15% on some costs, but some nonprofits and universities have negotiated federal indirect rates that are higher than that 15%. And so if that is the cost of doing business for your nonprofit, one of the webinars will focus on how to apply for a different indirect rate. Callie?
Does the funding entity, though, have to accept that alternative negotiated rate or whatever it's called, that higher rate?
I'm gonna answer this, and I'll let DEP dive into this one too. My understanding is if you have a negotiated federal rate, that is the rate you insert into your grants. And so DEP would have to accept a renegotiated direct rate. So if your direct rate was 23%, that's what you would put into the grant proposal. Is that right? Thank you. I see DEP shaking their head. Yep.
We work on this, but the working capital, like not having maybe access to a loan beforehand, and so when you get your invoices, you submit your reimbursement, and the time it takes sometimes to get that reimbursement, like you mentioned, people are waiting on getting paid. So the working capital loan program has really helped with that, but figuring that out within a grant and how we can cover the costs of such a thing is kind of bottleneck. We're working on it, but that has been a kind of a significant bottleneck.
And their program, I think, is actually better than the bank with the line of credit, because number one, depending on your grant, you can get that interest reimbursed, like quick response, which is growing greener. If we got the line of credit to float some reimbursements until we're waiting, we can put that into our administrative for quick response. However, when you get a line of credit at the bank, it is our experience that after you do that, within a month or two, you're going to get a monthly bill. $50 a month, $100 a month. With that, you don't. You pay it by the end of the grant that you're doing it. That's a big difference. It seems like a small amount of money, but it really matters.
Well, and for some of the planning grants, some of the design grants, and even some of the passive treatment implementation projects, that 50,000 should help. Once you start getting into the multi-million-dollar design grants and construction, that won't be anywhere near enough. And so, I'm happy to share with anyone who has interest in the working capital, share with you what our loan agreement looks like, what the payback terms look like. And then I'm also happy to share with you just how to enter the space of trying to access a line of credit with a bank. If and when your watershed organization or nonprofit does not have assets, securing a line of credit may also be a problem. And so that's when partnering with a larger nonprofit that might serve as your grantee, serve as your sponsor for your project, could be another way to go just to access that line of credit. So there's lots of solution sets here. What I'm finding is that most people don't know to ask those questions or even know that those are solutions.
And you build a relationship with your bank. After you do, let's just say, you have FCAM or WIPCAM work with your project, and they get the line of credit and they help you do that, and then it gets paid back and everything. The bank's going to get to know you as a watershed group, and they're going to feel more comfortable. Yeah, you don't have $80 zillion in the bank account. It's okay. We didn't either when we started, and we got a line of credit. They got to know you. They'll want their financials every year. That's what they'll want to see. How are you doing? Used to get a call every year. Andy, how's everything going? I said, we're fine. They said, we need your financials. Okay, I'll get them over to you. Be it an audit or a regular financial assessment every year. There's different levels of audits.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. I saw another question here. Mike?
Yeah, so the way that we went about it, without doing kind of extra money up front, we actually worked with our contractor for our Sawyersville project, multi-million-dollar, $4 million project. Typically when you pay a contractor, they want to be paid within 30 days, right? But we actually stipulated into the contract and said, you get paid when we get reimbursed. So you can actually negotiate that with your contractor, depending on how comfortable they feel with that. But understanding that we're a nonprofit that doesn't have multi-million, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars when they submit these invoices. The other thing too that was helpful was that they were submitting invoices monthly. smaller amounts, that there would be times where we could pay that and float that. Don't let it build up to several months, where then they're asking for $50,000, and then you're like,
But it helps if the
they work with them.
contractor can actually have a line of credit to keep his people afloat while he's waiting to get reimbursed from you,
Right.
rather than put the onus on you.
Right, and if they know that ahead of time in the
Yeah, oh, yeah.
contract, they'll figure it out.
Yeah, good points. And things that we've recommend is, making sure that you're looking through your contracts with your vendors closely to put in some of those parameters. Tally?
Yeah, I was just curious about the templates. So templates are really helpful. It's a great start. But do you think the watershed groups that will be using those templates may still need to hire a lawyer or an accountant or someone to kind of tweak them enough that they are really applicable to their situation?
Right. So no one template fits everyone because your bylaws are structured differently, your board is structured differently, who's able to make decisions is structured differently. So the template is enough to give you the information you need, but then you're going to have to adapt it based on your own governance. And so the templates would be part one. Sitting in on the webinars would be part two, to make sure that you understand what procurement means and how do I go about it, and then making sure that your policy on procurement matches the decision making. So for example, in some nonprofits, the executive director has the ability to sign off on contracts over or under a certain amount. Other nonprofits, they want the president to sign off. Those are the kinds of governance things you need to be thinking about. So the mentorship program is where we would have a team of accountants and lawyers that would take the template, take your governance structure, and then help you adopt them and as your governance. Not only putting the policies on paper, but then walking you through, okay, how do I go about implementing this? So what are the weekly and the monthly things that I need to do in order to actually apply that implementation strategy? So, how am I accounting for my time? How am I, getting the RFP written to hire the vendor that's gonna do the water monitoring assessment for us? Who needs to sign off on it? Those are the implementation strategies that would be part of this. I will say now, after the session, I actually need to run to do a presentation at a difference conference that's happening in State College. But John and Maggie are here from the foundation, and I highly encourage you, if you have more questions or if you have interest in accessing or learning more about working capital or learning more about the upcoming trainings, please get on our radar with them. And really quickly, I think I only have maybe a couple of minutes left. Okay. I wanted to just highlight just a couple other things that are happening that I think are really informative. I had mentioned that we have the grants program. I had mentioned that we do policy and capacity building. We're also really helping either put projects on the ground through project leadership, but also really trying to create partnerships so that we can be putting projects on the ground. There's a couple of really cool initiatives that are happening across Pennsylvania that I think are important to know about. We're working closely with Power and Pennsylvania Environmental Council to look at what recreational access looks like on rebounding streams. Initially, they're looking at the Kiski-Conemaugh watershed and the headwaters of the West Branch, though I think that effort will expand more as that work gets underway. So if you're interested in learning more, being part of that thinking, that strategy setting that's happening, I would reach out to them. There are a lot of agencies that are very interested in this topic. Now is the time to be thinking about how we protect land and get people on water as these streams are hopefully going to be cleaned up in the next 5 years, 10 years. It's a high priority for DCNR. It's a high priority for Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. It's a really high priority for philanthropy. So as you're thinking about where that passive treatment system goes or where the pipeline for the active treatment system is going, now is the time the community folks need to be thinking about, can we put public access easements? Can we be acquiring land and putting them in public holdings? Now is the time to be thinking about that. And so I again, want to put that on the radar. You had heard presentations earlier about the little Conemaugh plant. Please reach out to Tetra Tech and DEP if you're hearing more about how that project is moving along. The Chesapeake Bay is renegotiating their Bay Agreement goals. Part of the Bay Agreement goals has a toxics threshold in it, and part of that toxics threshold includes cleaning up AMD. So the potential for, if you're in the Bay watershed, the potential to access a different stream of dollars may be available to help you implement your projects and achieve the Bay restoration goals. And then last but not least, in addition to the DEP, AML, AMD grants, there are a lot of other grants that can help support the work you're doing. DCNR grants will be moving to an 80-20 component next grant round in the spring, meaning they'll fund 80% of your project and you'll only need to come up with a 20% match, which is different from every other year in the past. It's always been 50-50. So those are the kinds of projects where you can get DCNR dollars, and then with a little bit of creative finance, creative outreach, like funding through the foundation, you might be able to put some bigger projects on the ground that you didn't think were possible before. The Coldwater Heritage Partnership has small grants to do headwaters assessment work, which could be critical to identifying what headwaters systems look like as you're looking to do passive treatment systems. Fish and Boat Commission has access grants to put easements, fishing access easements on waterways. I do know that Growing Greener and WCAP monies are drying up or are going to be harder to get for this field of work. So begin thinking a little bit more about what those partnerships and other opportunities to access non-traditional dollars might look like. So with that, I've got a little bit of time to take a couple of questions, I think. Eric?
We have in a couple of places in the watershed some post-1977 problem areas where any, bonding and all that stuff, any of that money is long gone. One was the bond forfeiture, the other was a permitted site that, the company that did it, I think they did everything they were supposed to do according to the permit, but it's a disaster. And they're long gone. And so, of course, you're not able to go to IIJA because it's post 1977, and we got our eyes on ATP for one site, and that's a Marcellus shale funding. But there's a need out there, and I mean, I know the whole idea that there's supposed to be a responsible party and all this gobbledygook with it. In a lot of cases, in the late 70s, they learned some ugly lessons about not having adequate bonding, and these problem areas from that period are still here. And I just think that needs to be on the radar somewhere.
The STREAM Act and the set aside money, that is not able to be used for post 77 projects. Is that correct?
So just something that I was going to mention was that there's this growing, maybe it's a negative connotation, but they're called zombie mines. So they happened after 1977. And yeah, just exactly what you've been talking about is that there wasn't adequate bonding. But there is, I think, there is a source of funding through the Title V program that's you can get for bond forfeiture sites. And I think there's a pot of money for general, but I'm not 100% sure.
Part of Growing Greener allows bond forfeiture site work to be done as well.
True. And so there might be, like, maybe I can chat with you a little bit later and get you connected to your Title V program and see if there's funding, that type of bond forfeiture type money that's available.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. I'm being told we are at time, so I can stick around for a couple of minutes before I head out, but I do encourage you to visit with John and Maggie as well if you have additional questions. Thanks.
Next presentation will start here in 4 minutes, so bear with us.